You're standing at the entrance to a city. It's the year 1300. There is no passport in your pocket, no driver's license, no photograph of your face, no database containing your name, birthday, address, and the unfortunate picture taken when you weren't ready. A guard stops you and asks a very simple question. Who are you? And you can say absolutely anything. You could claim to be a merchant, a nobleman, a messenger from the king, or the personal dentist of the Pope. So how would anyone know whether you were telling the truth? Today, proving your identity takes a few seconds. You show a card, scan a fingerprint, enter a password, or stare awkwardly into a camera until your phone recognizes your face. But for most of human history, none of that existed. There were no standard identity cards. Most documents had no photographs. Millions of people shared the same names. Many could not read. And governments had no central system capable of checking everyone. And yet, people still bought property, inherited money, entered cities, crossed borders, joined armies, made contracts, and occasionally pretended to be someone much more important than they really were. So how did identity work before ID cards? The answer is surprisingly simple. Your identity was not something you carried. It was something other people remembered. For most early communities, proving your identity was not much of a problem. You lived in a small village. You worked with the same people, bought food from the same families, and probably knew far too much about everyone's private business. Nobody needed a document proving that you were Thomas the baker. You were Thomas the baker because everyone had watched you bake bread for 20 years. Your identity was a combination of your face, your family, your occupation, your reputation, and the place where you lived. You were not simply Robert. You were Robert, son of William, or Robert from York, or Robert the miller, or possibly Robert the extremely loud, although that one was less likely to appear in an official record. This is one reason surnames developed gradually in many societies. As populations grew and communities contained several people with the same first name, additional labels helped distinguish one person from another. But the system was not really based on names. It was based on recognition. If a dispute occurred, other members of the community could confirm who you were. Your neighbors, relatives, employer, local priest, or landowner effectively formed a living identity database. Except the database complained about your behavior and borrowed your tools without returning them. This worked remarkably well. Until you left home. Imagine walking several days away from your village. Nobody recognizes your face. Nobody knows your parents. Nobody has heard of your reputation. You arrive in a town and say you are an honest merchant. That is exactly what a dishonest merchant would say. You claim that you represent a respected guild. Very impressive. Can anyone confirm it? You say a wealthy man owes you money. Conveniently, that wealthy man is not present. The farther people traveled, the less useful community recognition became. Medieval Europe contained merchants, pilgrims, students, clergy, soldiers, diplomats, and messengers, constantly moving between places where they were unknown. The solution was not immediately to create a universal identity card. Instead, people borrowed the reputation of someone more powerful. A respected person or institution could write a letter introducing you, recommending you, or confirming the purpose of your journey. In other words, the letter did not always prove, "This is definitely the person named here." It often said something closer to, "The bearer of this letter is connected to us, and we expect you to treat him accordingly." Your credibility came from the person whose authority stood behind the document. It was the medieval equivalent of arriving somewhere and saying, "You don't know me, but you know my boss." Letters of recommendation, protection, and safe conduct helped travelers establish trust. But this created another problem. How could anyone know the letter was genuine? Today, you might sign a document at the bottom, but signatures were not always the main method of authentication. For much of medieval society, one of the most important tools was the seal. A seal matrix was a carved object pressed into soft wax attached to a document. It could contain a symbol, coat of arms, religious image, portrait, name, or title associated with its owner. The impression showed that the document had been authorized by the person or institution connected to that seal. Kings had seals. Nobles had seals. Bishops, monasteries, towns, guilds, and other institutions used seals. Even people below the highest levels of society could use personal seals in legal and commercial situations. A seal did more than close a document. It represented authority. In a society where many people could not personally verify handwriting and where a handwritten signature was not yet the universal standard, a recognizable seal gave a document legal and social weight. Of course, seals could be stolen, copied, or misused. Human beings did not wait for the invention of the internet before discovering identity fraud. But forging an important seal was difficult and dangerous. A suspicious document could be compared with known examples examined by officials, or rejected if its language, materials, or appearance seemed wrong. The document proved the authority behind the message. It still did not perfectly prove that the person holding it was the person described inside. For that, people needed witnesses. Before photography, biometrics, and centralized records, witnesses were essential. Suppose you claimed ownership of land. A plastic card would not settle the matter. People might need to confirm your family connection, your inheritance, the original agreement, or the fact that everyone had treated the property as yours for years. Suppose you arrived to collect money on someone else's behalf. The person paying might require a letter, a seal, and someone trustworthy who could confirm your role. Suppose you were accused of being a criminal. Officials might ask people who knew you or circulate a physical description if you had disappeared. Identity was therefore not one piece of evidence. It was a network. Your name was one part. Your appearance was another. Your family, occupation, accent, clothing, relationships, documents, and reputation all contributed. Today, identity verification asks, does this face match this photograph? Earlier societies often asked, does this person fit the story surrounding him? Does he know the people he claims to know? Does he speak like someone from the place he names? Does he carry the correct letter? Is the seal genuine? Will a respected person vouch for him? Does his appearance match the available description? The system was slower and less precise, but it was not foolish. It combined multiple social signals, just as modern security systems combine a password, a phone, a fingerprint, and a verification code. Except one of the factors was your neighbor saying, yes, unfortunately, that is definitely him. Written documents gradually became more useful for identifying travelers, officials, and wanted individuals. But without photographs, how do you describe a human face accurately? You record visible characteristics. A document or notice might mention someone's approximate age, height, hair, beard, complexion, scars, occupation, clothing, or place of origin. This could help. But human descriptions are famously unreliable. Imagine looking for a man described as medium height, brown hair, wearing a dark coat. You have just described half the population of a rainy European town. Distinctive features were therefore especially valuable. A missing finger, a visible scar, an unusual birthmark, or another recognizable feature was much harder to imitate than a name. Clothing could also communicate identity, although imperfectly. Uniforms, badges, religious dress, guild symbols, and signs of rank told observers where someone might belong. But clothing could be changed. A letter could be stolen. A seal could be copied. A witness could lie. The real weakness of the system was that identity depended heavily on local knowledge, and the world was becoming less local. Small communities could identify people through reputation. Large cities could not. Trade expanded. Governments collected more taxes. Armies became larger. More people crossed borders. Bureaucracies produced growing quantities of records. Authorities increasingly needed to distinguish between individuals they had never personally met. This transformed identity from a social relationship into an administrative problem. Records of births, marriages, deaths, property, taxation, military service, and legal proceedings connected people to written histories, but these records were usually stored separately. There was no single screen where an official could type your name and instantly discover everything about you, and names were messy. Spelling was inconsistent. A person might use different versions of a name in different places. Several people might share an identical name. A date of birth might be unknown or recorded incorrectly. The world had more documents than before, but the documents did not always connect cleanly to one unique human being. Travel documents also remained limited. The modern passport was not simply invented in one dramatic moment. It emerged gradually as governments became more capable and more interested in recording, regulating, and identifying people moving through their territory. But even then, an identity document without a photograph had an obvious weakness. Someone else could carry it. Photography changed everything. For the first time, a document could contain a repeatable visual image of the person it described. Now an official did not need to rely entirely on a written description or someone else's word. They could look at the person, then look at the photograph, then look back at the person for slightly too long. And identification still works this way today. But photographs were only part of the solution. During the 19th century, police forces dealing with growing urban populations needed better ways to distinguish repeat offenders who could simply give false names. Systems based on detailed body measurements were developed, followed by increasingly systematic use of fingerprints. Fingerprinting proved more reliable for connecting an individual to a previous record because the pattern did not depend on a person truthfully giving the same name. This represented a major change. Earlier identity systems asked, "Who says this person is?" Modern systems increasingly asked, "What physical feature makes this person uniquely identifiable?" The answer moved from reputation to measurement, from witnesses to records, from social memory to bureaucracy, and eventually from paper to databases. So, was it easy to steal someone's identity before modern identification? In some ways, yes. A traveler could use a false name. A convincing person might invent a background. A stolen letter or document could help support the lie. There was no instant national database to expose every contradiction. But impersonation was also harder than it sounds. Earlier societies were intensely social. Your identity was connected to people, places, and obligations. You needed to know family relationships, local customs, employers, routes, events, and details that someone from the claimed community would understand. The more important the identity, the more people might recognize the real person or know someone who did. Pretending to be a random traveler was possible. Pretending to be a famous nobleman while standing inside that nobleman's castle was a less promising strategy. The old system did not eliminate fraud, neither does ours. It simply trusted different evidence. Today, someone may steal your password, copy a document, or manipulate a digital account. In the past, someone could steal a letter, forge a seal, or persuade the wrong witness. Every identity system creates a new way to prove who you are, and every new method creates a new way for someone to pretend. So how did people prove who they were before ID cards? Most of the time, they did not prove it with one object. They proved it through a combination of recognition, reputation, family connections, occupation, witnesses, letters, seals, physical descriptions, and official records. In a small community, you were the person everyone knew. When you traveled, you carried the reputation of someone who could introduce or protect you. When written government systems expanded, your identity became connected to records. Photography attached your face to the document. Fingerprints attached your body to the record, and digital systems eventually attached all of it to a database. Modern identity is more precise, portable, and scalable than anything medieval society possessed. But it is also strangely impersonal. 1,000 years ago, proving your identity often meant finding someone who knew you. Today, it means convincing a machine. And perhaps that is the biggest difference. In the old world, your identity lived in other people's memories. In the modern world, it lives in systems. Until you forget your password. Then apparently you no longer exist.